Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Silver Tempest, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are going to be looking at the top 8 placing decks from the LAIC, and Lugia was completely dominant. As you can see, the statistics here, of the top 32 decks, 22 of them was this archetype. It completely lived up to expectations. It's one thing everyone, in terms of content creation, putting this as a tier S, the best deck, and it's a completely other story saying just how crazy this is, and almost 69% meta share of the top 32 is absurd. There's been very few tournaments where a deck can equal the dominance that Lugia Archeops had in the early stages of Silver Tempest. And I do stress that it is early, and people will be knee-jerking and reacting to Lugia now being solidly the best deck in the game, but one that we will try and answer and have counters to, and give it the respect it deserves, really. I think the biggest issue with Lugia Archeops itself being the best deck in the game is that because its cornerstone is insane energy acceleration, it means we can throw in all sorts of random attackers to swat away the counters. I think that's the biggest issue with Lugia Archeops being the best deck. It can be reactive itself and keep one step ahead of the counters. So that's something that is a genuine concern, and I also think that there are genuine reasons to not like the Lugia mirror match as well. It feels like player one, if all things go to chalk and they actually get set up, they should be winning almost always, as long as they don't get funky with their resources or have too many awkward retreats or anything like that, or miss gusting on certain turns. There are things, of course, that can go wrong. It's not like 100-0 of player one versus player two. There's always going to be some intricacy. Just look at the players that did well and won X many mirror matches throughout the tournament. They were the better players that have been established for a number of years and are playing the game at the top level. So there's clearly some element of skill to it, but obviously the more you play that mirror, the more you'll realize that there's not much you can do going second. You need to find and give yourself little windows of opportunity, but you're still going to be pretty awkward and unhappy when you are flipping tails in that mirror match scenario. And that's a problem when a deck could end up being 30 or 35% of the day one field. It could even get more than that, to be honest with you, with different variations of Lugia. So there are some concerns about it. Just wanted to give my speech on the meta, because I know a lot of people are already giving the doomsday, giving the ban hammer question marks and all this sort of stuff. I don't think we're going to get to that level. I think regardless of how good it does in this format, there will be more people trying to steal wins against the Lugia deck with counter-style archetypes. I did a video yesterday on the sort of best counter decks in the game to Lugia, the things that naturally have a high win rate. But I also think just the likes of Lost Box, Mew, Reggie's, the control deck, these are all solid decks in the game. Not just at beating Lugia, but they can beat the rest of the field as well, which means, even if we only have 5 very good decks, then a handful of Lugia counter decks, which are specifically there just in the game because they beat Lugia, I think that's still a decently diverse pool of decks, honestly. I know we're coming off of Lost Origin meta, where there was insane deck diversity, where easily 10 decks could have won on a given day if they just hit the right matchups and whatnot. Now it seems, it's going to be target Lugia and this other stuff, but we've had these sorts of metas before. There are some people who would even argue that they prefer a narrow metagame. I'm actually one of those people as well, so give me your hate speeches in the comments, but I would actually way prefer to enter a tournament where there are 5 good decks than 10 good decks, because it's an easier thing to metagame and augment your decks towards beating a smaller number of decks, rather than just having to come up against any random stuff and you just sort of get put into the roller coaster of the matchups and you win or lose based on that. So just a quick mini speech about that, because I know a lot of people have strong opinions on Lugia, especially because it took 6 of the top 8 placements and was obviously shown throughout the stream in the LAIC. I think there was no avoiding that, just for how popular it was and how successful it was. And when you do see the numbers here, it is quite scary. But let's get into the list themselves. What are the most successful? And now we really just do have to tip our hat to Tord. I think his legacy has now been cemented as the best player of all time. I think he can happily not play a single game of Pokemon from now, and it will be years until anyone reaches the achievements that he has Worlds is the only thing left on his list. Even then, he's got a top 4, which is, an immense achievement already. And he will most likely continue playing and continue dominating tournaments. So I think he will outpace anyone who's trying to keep up with him. There are also some great names out there performing at the highest level, nipping at his heels. So they are keeping Tord honest and keeping him playing, which I'm very happy to see. But what a sensational player. And I love the bravery of Tord's list. The bravery is he just wants to get in the game and is saying that Primal Turbo is enough of a win condition without the tricks, without the flair, without anything else. Tord is playing the full 4 Archeops, the 4-3 Lugia. He's playing the Oranguru as well, which is in both finalist lists, really showing that can be very helpful at putting energies back on top of your deck to make sure you're not missing out on Primal Turbos when you're just naturally drawing into them, but also giving you some protection against Marnie, against Path decks as well. You can always bank things on top of that deck, which is always very helpful for you. It can also protect some important cards from a research. Your one-ofs like Stoutland, like Radiant Charizard, if you don't think it's the right time to put them into play, you need to actually be quite cautious with your bench in the opening stages because you need to keep slots open for Summoning Star. It can allow you to bank these cards and research quite happily, which is the emphasis of the deck because you want to discard Archeops early on in the game. So Tord keeping things very simple. Even his energy count is more simple than most. He's opting to have 4 capture energy and is just saying, get me in the game, get me playing this game. He can outplay most people genuinely, especially when you have this toolbox of attackers. The Lugia can put in work, Charizard, Yveltal, the Minion, and even the Stoutland are all big cards that can come in an attacking sense and cause some interesting spots for the opponent. So really like how he's divvied up everything here. Is playing 1 collapsed, 1 lost vacuum. I think people were sort of floating between that 1 and 2 count for both of those sorts of cards. But again, Tord is just saying, get me in the game, let me be as simple as possible, and everything else will work itself out, because he can do a lot with these cards. He can play pretty well. And even though he didn't play flawlessly in finals, he did well enough to cement himself in history as Mr. Worldwide, winning every international championships. You just have to marvel at his accomplishments in the game. Such an incredible player. And when we look at the other lists, this is the one that I think most people will take. I imagine most people will probably make some changes to Tord's list. It's only natural that he gets to play the most refined, the most simple list at the start of the format, and then now we have to sort of react to the reactions that other people will have, where maybe we will start seeing V-Guards creep in again, and cutting into that capture energy count. Even though you're losing some percentage points, it gives you more power level. And I know Tord always talks about his consistency versus power level index. Sometimes he just wants to be all on that consistency side. As you go further into the meta, you have to respect and react and adapt. But Tord is so good at capitalizing on early, unrefined metas. He did it with Palkintel, he did it with Lost Box, and he's done it again with Lugia, just by picking what he thinks is the best deck when a new set comes out, trusting power creep, and trusting that he can make a better list than everyone else in a blind field, essentially. And it's worked, again, wonders for him. The bravery of keeping a list this simple is just spectacular and really, really well done. I'm giving Tord all the compliments because I'm going to be a bit more harsh to the other Lugias. We have Kalza in second, who's also, by the way, on an insane run over the last year and a half, and is a very talented and strong player. They're playing a very interesting list. They have the same core as the Zard, Yveltal, Stoutland. Also playing Oranguru, so straight away, all the compliments I gave to Tord, I have to pass on here as well. There is no Dunsparce in this list, and there's also like no Tool Jammer, so you can get punished by the likes of Raikou Belt in mirror match situations. You can get punished by Regieleki as well. I don't think there's too much of an issue there because it is playing the quad collapse stadium, so you're sort of counterbalancing that, so I understand why that's the case. There's also no Pumpkin in here as well, which does make me a little bit scared. The double fish is definitely a cool concept and can be helpful in Lost Box matches as well as a number of others. So I think that could be something a number of people adopt. The 4-2 line of Lugia, I asked on Twitter and I got a response from Lucas. I understand the logic behind the discussion, and essentially the discussion in short was you try and cosplay as a one-prize deck for a number of matchups, so you only set up one Lugia V-Star, so you only get sort of punished by playing the lesser copies when it's prized, or you have to like research one away, and then you don't have that option. But my real gripe is that you're just limiting your outs, and this is a deck that has to spend its ball search on Archeops so very often that I will still always preach to play a third Lugia V-Star. It also lets you Guru like other things and just play differently. So I still believe that 3 Lugia V-Star and the 4 Archeops is the correct amount. But the 4 Collapsed really is a statement. And I think it's a scary statement for Reggie players, for one thing. But this was more so because there's no Pumpkin here. So having the 1 Vacuum, the quad Collapsed was the way to bounce path. I still feel like it's safer to play Pumpkin. Obviously, just physically the amount of outs you gain by having it. And I do think these Collapsed, you can go down to 2 copies of Collapsed, and I still think you're sort of fine in matchups, and you're still reasonable at seeing this in a good amount of time to represent that 1 prize map, especially when the Luminion can throw itself back into the deck anyway. All it's really helping out with is like if you just happen to start Stoutland, which sucks, or like if you happen to need to put double Lugia down against high pressure decks like Mew or whatever, and then need to collapse later. But I think that's completely fine. Kalza also played quad capture, which is really nice, and even though he only played 2 V-Star, still played 4 Lugia V, which makes that statement of just get it down on turn 1, just get into the game, which is really solid. One thing I don't like is Heat Fire over Hiding. Hiding is just clearly superior when it can go on a Yveltal and protect energy around the board. The hit points gained from Heat Fire is really marginal. It can try and stop like a Speed Wing response KO maybe, or force more powerfuls out. I'm not sure what else this keeps you out of range of that's that relevant. I think there's a number of people that are playing the Heat Fire over the Hiding, but I'm not a big fan of it. I think Hiding, obviously, you give yourself an out to Yveltal and to Charizard, which I guess is one of the big things, whereas the Hiding only goes on to Yveltal. So I think that's the argument for the Heat Fire. Maybe lets you be more liberal with Aurora attaching to like Lugias to get rid of Archeops in the early game, but I still think it's like that balance of resources. If you really want to do that, I would play Hiding and Heat rather than just Heat and no Hiding. So it's a minor thing there, but it's my preference personally, and it's what Tord went for. So in Tord we trust. Grant was one of the spiciest players in the room, alongside Azul with his top 16 placement as well, playing the Kyogre combo variant of Lost Box, and I think a number of his other teammates played it as well. Very cool to see. Obviously, this had a number of online showings just leading up to the tournament, and the Aquastorm is certainly scary text where people misuse their Manaphy and it can really go out of control. And the Kyogre is very scary. So, and also in like a closed decklist environment, the Kyogre gets even more scary in a way because people see a Greninja and start thinking, do I want to put Manaphy down to protect my board in some instances? And then, the Sableye can sprinkle Manaphy over and over again for free value, and then the Kyogre can still come in and do things. So I actually think this deck progressively gets worse the longer the tournament goes, and by the time Grant is in cut, everyone knows that he's playing Kyogre list and can play around it appropriately with timing their Manaphy, which is what we saw essentially Tord doing in that top 4 game. So the Kyogre's kind of cool. I like the rabbit in the hat situation. I like the belt in here for Snorlax. The thump through the Stoutland is really important to have an instant knockout there. I do worry a little bit about not having like Raihan or anything to cherry pick this card. It seems kind of random to actually get it at the right time. The Raikou in here as well. I'm not a huge fan of a 2-prizer trying to deal with a 2-prizer. I think the concept is you just need something light on resources to get in there early, and even if you are trading, because you're as 1-prizy as them, for the most part, if not more, you'll be able to catch up that race, and the 2 for 2 in theory is in your favour. But I don't think that's always necessarily the case. It could almost be like a bait card as well to force things like Dunsparce into play so you can punish them later. So even just seeing Lightning Energy in a Lost Box makes people play differently as the Lugia player. So there could be an element of that in the deck as well. For me, I think there could easily be better Lightning answers for Lost Box. I think going forward it's going to be Kyogre comes out because it was a Wombo combo style card where you need to get to the bottom of your deck, and it's not always the easiest thing to do. And I think it's going to be replaced by other 1-prize Lightning stuff, or just more Snorlax, more Twin Energy, more Belt, so you can deal with a Stoutland on the spot, because that just has to be done. More Raihans, very similar to the Seniors winning list, which was Twin Energy, Snorlax, Radzard, Belts, and Raihans. I think that creates a safer package against Lugia and respects it by continuing to be a 1-prize deck, because you know they'll still take 2-prize knockouts on you, with Cheeky Stoutland, so you have to be respecting of that and stay as one prizey as possible. Nonetheless, very cool deck. They actually did have some great innovation with this list as well, having like the Pokestops just to help you dig deeper. Having Clara in here wasn't necessarily common as well, and that's kind of cool. So it did let the deck cosplay quite a lot similarly to a Charizard list that had a different late game combo. It's almost like having a Radiant Zard ×2 because you're bonking that onto the bench rather than just having one Zard hitting the active. So it's a one-time deal, but it's a better turn than a Radiant Zard turn in a lot of ways. So yeah, very cool combo. We have another list. This is from John and their group. This is where I start getting a little bit worrisome of how greedy some of the Lugia players have got. 3 Lugia, 3 Archeops, 2 Capture, and choosing to play Speed as well over Hiding. Like, there's no way that Hiding is less valuable than Speed. Surely the Yveltal is the more valuable card. Because the Raikou only comes into play in situations when there's not Manaphy or Dunsparce or both on the board. You're playing the 3rd belt to try and supplement the Raikou, and I'm sure in some mirror match situations this helps. But I don't think it helps like enough for me to warrant the spaces. The Crobat's an interesting one. I think I was testing a lot of Crobat earlier on, but it seems like the fishes are the more important part of this list, so I imagine this could easily get cut for a second fish or turn into that Stoutland as a potential alternative card that again helps you into the Lost Box matchup. So I can foresee that being the case. I like the double vacuum and the collapse. This is kind of the way I would play it, the right way round, if that makes sense, where you're still having a high count of bounces alongside your pumpkin. So that's kind of cool. It's really just the thin lines here's what's kind of like ugly to me, and this should definitely be a Hiding, right? Hiding has to be a higher priority than Speed, I would imagine. And you also need to bump up these capture counts. Even Gift versus Capture's a debate. Like, Gift obviously has that mid-game upside, but it has to be on the right things. You know, it doesn't work on Raikou, doesn't work on Yveltal, or you have to, like, shoehorn it to work with these cards. And you have to Primal Turbo differently, or have, like, it as a manual attachment on top of this sort of stuff. So it's kind of like a fake energy. This could just end up being a Capture or a Hiding, and I think it works out better. So, again, I'm a harsh critic because we've seen Tord's list now and it's like, oh, a chef's kiss. So everything else looks greedier than his. So, you know, it's a tough crowd out here. We have Sander's control deck. Sander, obviously one of the best control players, and everyone knew that Crowd Destruction was going to be strong against Lugia. It's just how you best create a deck around it to have win conditions against the remainder of the format. Crowd Destruction is also very strong into Mew, of course. So that's also important. So we are seeing a few different things going on here, where we have some colorless pokes alongside the Sharon's Care Eldegoss loop. So you have some Gourmandize to help you draw in the opening stages. We have a Greedent, which can have guaranteed discard of energy here. And we have a Pidgeot V, which, you know, it sounds like it's just going to be in here to prevent your own deck out, but you can already be infinite with this deck with Eldegoss Loop, so it's actually another sponge that gives you upside, because this can, again, with Radguardy, with Cape, these both get pretty tanky for colorless Pokemon, so they're definitely in here for that purpose as well. Miltank always causes, you know, retreating, spending of energy, all this other stuff that's really awkward and can sometimes buy turns, so it's just a natural include for a deck like this. The Radguardy is actually huge to stop Luminion bounce, protecting its energy against a Yveltal player just crying all the time. So this is what helps you out in that matchup, certainly. Manaphy protecting from snipes, of course. The Ice Cube Wash Water package is trying to help out against unprepared Lost Boxes. And I think, I know Pedro did play Temple of Sinnoh, but it wasn't a commonplace card. I know I discussed it in my top 10, but it wasn't in the main 60 I had, so it was sort of just being discovered as Washwater Ice Cube was being thrown into a number of Lugias, but not enough of them to really be notable. So Sander trying to be first on the scene, sort of cash in on this option while he can, before Lost Boxes wisen up. I think it could easily be that we see at least a Temple, possibly like Echoing Horn, going back into some Lost Box decks, so that they can beat Blockface. That's kind of the idea. So just be warned that it may not be as effective as it was for Sander this weekend, and I think there will also be some Lugia players adapting, adding in the likes of Blissey V, the likes of Birdkeeper, the likes of their own Eldegoss. These could all be cards. Like, Eldegoss certainly is just a card that's good in the deck in general, almost acts as that second fish. And yeah, like the Blissey, kind of not great, but obviously helpful against crowd destruction spam, and the Bird Keeper helping you get around like Galamine and such. So these could be easy additions for Lugia. I'm sure there are other answers as well. I think you can get creative with your Summoning Star as well for some counters if you really want to. So if you are respecting this control deck, I'm sure there will be disciples of Sander popping off with this deck over all the regionals coming up this week. But yeah, just in general, very cool list. It has more disruption in here as well. It's got, you know, your classic 2 counts of the things that you don't want to prize. It has Peona just in case. It has Psyley to try and cycle the cards that you need to when you need to. The fact that you get a comp search is kind of just funny. It's just a nice combo that you can do. Yeah, and you've got Galamine coming in and lots of redundancy in terms of disruption. Sydney in here as well for people holding off on resources. You can attack their hand. Hitting special energies is obviously very good, and obviously hitting stadiums also very helpful. So yeah, a classic Eldegoss loop package that we've seen before from Sander, but now with more of an attacking focus in terms of I'm aggressively attacking your energy cards for certainly Mew players and certainly Lugia players. So having a good matchup into the 2 best decks in format is very good. Just anecdotally, because obviously I'm a teammate of Sander, he went 18-2 in games against Lugia. One of those losses, of course, being to Tord. So yeah, bit of an issue there. And he actually won game 1 against Tord. So it's literally because of the Top Cut rules where Tord has more time to win a second game that Sander actually ended up losing the set, because he loses a game, then it goes to a game 3, and Tord just has to be ahead on prizes, right, to win in Top Cut. So Sander always willingly a victim of the Top Cut constraints, but it's because he gets to go so far in these tournaments by having a genius concoction that no one wants to sit opposite. Pedro was playing another Lugia deck, again, greeding the 3rd Archeops, which I will never agree to, especially when you're playing cards like Raikou as well. Like, you're choosing to just add greed to your deck that only works if you get double Archeops out in the first place. It's like, why don't you just do the thing? Why don't you just be doing what you want to be doing? Win the games you actually win that coin flip, you know? Just don't have things go wrong. Just to research makes me so sad, you know? There's a lot that I'm not a huge fan of. Quick note on Sharon's care. It wasn't in a number of the lists that we've seen earlier. I think it can be strong and could be an option. I think especially with Guru. Like, seeing Sharon's with no Guru is also really weird, because the Guru is so influential at putting energy back into the deck for you to yeet back out with Primal Turbo. So that's like a strange combination. But regardless, this can be pretty nice. It can help you against some paralysis combos from like a Zekrom and a Lost Box. It can help you against things trying to set up damage as well, like Sableye and whatnot. So that can be pretty cheeky. I don't think it's a bad card, and I think it could be, again, coming into deck lists. We've talked about Fishbat already, and that sort of divvying up. And again, people valuing speed over hiding is just so weird for me, especially when you play Bat. Like, you're giving yourself an extra card that wants to be hiding. So it's so weird. You can give yourself then you have 2 pivots in your deck, and you're choosing to have none just for the option of a random speed here and there. So strange, so strange. Then we have Kieran, who is playing, you guessed it, Lugia. And this is the greediest of the bunch, I think. Choosing to play Quad Shu over Archeops, Lugia just can't be right? I think some of the good news that we can carve out is that there are 4 captures in a lot of these lists that have been doing very well, and that's obviously a big deal. There's a lot of heats going in over hidings, and I think that's just to divvy up your resources between these 2 dudes, but I think hiding's still the stronger of the 2, personally. All play 1-1 if you're really going into this line. But yeah, Shoes just doesn't feel right over the other stuff. The Mew as an additional good lead is kind of a cute thing, I guess. But it's still weak into Lost Box, so you don't actually want it in play that often. And if you are going to do this, you probably need to play an extra Collapsed. So I think Guru is probably just the stronger card in general because of the things I outlined earlier in how it helps you throughout the mid-game. So yeah, I would keep it simple. I think these are definitely the core 3. I'm kind of off the boil on Raikou just because there's Manaphy Dunce in all the lists that we've seen apart from the ones that were playing Raikou, because obviously you don't want to shut off your own Raikou. And I think Raikou is probably not great. I'm thinking of Jammer as well, possibly coming into these Lugias. Like, there's so much mirror, and so few of them play Raikou going forward, that we may be able to get rid of Dunsparce and play Jammer, because Jammer still gives you some protection against Amazing Red Raikou and Aleki, just a small note there as like how it could be developing Lugia in future. But yeah, those are the lists. Overall, play 4-3 Lugia, play 4 Archeops. I've preached it from the start. It's always going to be my line. I think at least 3 captures, but I wouldn't help. I wouldn't. Yeah, 3. I wouldn't hate you for not playing 4, but I think 3 is the minimal count of captures that go in the list. I think Zard, Yveltal, Stoutland are core. I think everything else is kind of fluffy and doesn't help your overall just get me into the game. And I think it's valid to be wanting to make tech space to Yveltal control that Sanders brought, because you don't have to be skillful to beat Lugia with this deck. Like, you have to be very skillful to beat your other matchups with this deck, but I think just going Ree with your Yveltal every single turn, crying out those energies, is pretty easy and shouldn't take too much time to learn how to win that matchup. So, yeah, Sanders made it easy for you to beat Lugia, which is terrifying for Lugia players. Let me know your thoughts down below. Is it going to see too much play for you to... Does it actually put you off playing Lugia that it sees this amount of play now that there's mirrors, which could be coin flippy, now that there's control trying to target you, now knowing that you're public enemy number 1 may put a number of people off Lugia, or are these numbers saying, duh, obviously Lugia's the best deck, and the best pointer, no matter what I come up against in the room. I'll hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.